Hey everyone, it's Mojaxx, back in the DJcity UK lab today with my review of the LC6000 from Denon DJ. Now this is a newly announced product, but they've been teasing it and leaking it for quite some time. And based on those leaks, I thought it did certain things. But it turns out that's really only half the story with this product. Let's get to it. We'll first talk about the functionality which Denon DJ have been accidentally on purpose leaking for months now. The LC in LC6000 stands for Layer Controller. It connects to the company's existing Prime Series players and gives you full physical control over the second playback layer. From the beginning with the SC5000 PRIME, the players have had those two layers with accompanying dual audio outputs. It's always seemed like a pretty significant value add, as for each player you buy, you effectively get two. Whilst making full use of both layers was perfectly possible before, and indeed I've done a number of gigs with just a single player, switching between them was never quite as intuitive as having dedicated physical controls for both. And there would always be some unavoidable limitations. You can't activate a loop on one layer whilst hitting a hot cue on the other, that kind of thing. So I've always lent towards having two units if possible. With the leaks of the LC6000 and the release of Engine OS 1.6 earlier this year, suddenly Denon DJ's intended direction became very clear. The whole range of Prime players have a new view mode available with large waveforms for both layers, and the LC6000 is the device which unlocks the full control over Layer B. Being just a controller, that brings with it two main benefits. Because it doesn't require the built-in processing and the screen, the computery stuff, it is both lighter at under 3 kilograms and more affordable at around $700 street price in the US. That's compared with the full SC6000 player, which clocks in at 5.8 kilograms and costs $1,700. Taking a look at the hardware, you might think that the LC looks a lot like the SC6000 without the screen, and well, you'd be right, as that's basically what it is. It's built in the same way with a composite body and aluminium top panel. The pads, buttons and other controls all feel identical to the SC6000. This is of course one of the keys to the LC's success as a layer controller for the SC6000s. If you cut off the top sections of both devices, they are exactly the same. So it doesn't feel compromised in terms of control versus the full player. You have the same full length pitch fader, the 8 performance pads with the same modes. There's really very little which is different besides the addition of a needle drop touch strip at the top, so you don't need to reach over to the main player for that. The jog wheel is the same as on the SC6000 an 8.5-inch diameter capacitive jog with the large central display showing the virtual playhead, track artwork or your logo, and the loop length when that's active. My thoughts on that jog wheel have not changed since my review of the SC6000. It's a solid performer, far better than the one on the SC5000, and although the overall momentum and dynamics do feel different from, say, a mechanical CDJ jog wheel, most users should be able to get very comfortable using it thanks to the adjustable tension. It can take a second to get your head around how the LC6000 connects to an SC player. On the rear, it has a power switch, a USB port, and a port for the optional power supply, which you definitely won't need when connecting to a player. It is fully bus powered. You plug in the main player to power and hook up both of its audio outputs, either through analog or digital cables. Then you connect the LC6000 via USB and that's it. If you don't already have the dual waveform view open, it will switch to that automatically and then you're off. What's it like to use? Remarkably straightforward. Once you get over the mental disconnect of the screen being on a different device, it is really intuitive. Thankfully, Denon DJ have enabled the option to swap which layer is on the left or the right of the screen, so the display still makes logical sense whichever side the LC is placed on relative to the main player. There are a lot of potential setup options with the LC6000. You can have one main player and add on an LC for a 2-deck setup, or you can add on 1 or 2 LCs to a pair of SCs and have a 3 or 4 deck rig. And as you'll have noticed, the main players do not need to be SC6000s for these setups to work. I've been using it with SC6000Ms and my old SC5000, and the experience was the same throughout, even if the aesthetics can look a little odd. Is there a chance of there being a spinning platter LC6000M version released at some point? My suspicion is that it is unlikely, but I would be happy to see one as I do love those spinning platters. At the moment, the LC6000 does only work with individual players in the Prime series, but I do question whether there might be some potential to make them compatible with the Prime 4. That also runs on Engine OS, just like the players, and it has enough USB ports to do the job. A Prime 4 and a pair of LCs would be a pretty killer 4-deck rig in my opinion. So on the Prime series side of things, the LC6000 is a really compelling addition to their lineup. It's a good value way to expand an existing Prime setup you already have, and if you're just diving into that ecosystem, you can now pick up an SC6000 and LC6000 pairing with full control over 2 decks for the same price as a single flagship media player from the competition. And so if that's all the LC6000 did, that would be cool. But it isn't. Now we get into the stuff which I did not see coming, and which I think is going to make a lot of DJs start rethinking their setups. Because not only is the LC6000 a layer controller for the Prime series, but it's also a controller for Serato DJ Pro, Virtual DJ and Algoriddim's DJ. Now, I might be wrong, but I don't think we've actually seen a dedicated static platter controller like this in about a decade, with the last one I recall seeing also being from Denon, the SC5000. And it works a treat. I've mostly been using it with Serato DJ Pro, and the integration is spot on, with artwork and the playhead being sent to the jog displays, pad modes all translating as you'd expect, and the controls all feeling precise and on point. It's just like having an SC6000 connected in controller mode, just without the screen. You'll still need a Serato supported mixer or audio interface to use with the LCs, but there are no restrictions as to which type or brand that is. Each LC6000 can be switched between whatever number of decks you have active in the software, up to 4, either on startup or during performance by holding Shift and the slip mode button. So a single LC6000 can be used for all 4 decks, or you can add them to an existing setup for extra control. Here I'm using them with a 2-channel Hercules controller, which is kind of pointless, but it illustrates what can be done. The LCs will work in harmony with almost any combination of hardware. Want a 3rd deck alongside an existing turntable DVS setup? Want control over decks 3 or 4 on a 4-deck controller? The LC6000 will do the trick every time. And it's portable too. You can fit a single LC6000 into many backpacks, and at under 3 kilograms it's really no burden at all to carry around. The same plug-and-play simplicity applies to Virtual DJ and DJ too, and that wide-ranging support really points to the flexibility of the LCs. Aside from Rekordbox for obvious reasons, the one big notable name missing from the list is of course Traktor, but as these are static platter devices, I don't really see any technical hurdles there, so hopefully that can be a possibility for the future. Why is all of this such a big deal? Well, as cool as the Rain 12s are, the only other current example of a high-end deck controller I can think of, spinning platters are not for everyone. As I've said on this channel before, at this point there are many experienced professional DJs who've never used anything but media players or controllers in their whole career. And if you're a DJ who doesn't want spinning platters, but who wants to use, say, a top-end battle mixer with Serato DJ Pro, what are your options? A full-fledged media player with controller mode will work great, but the cheapest Pioneer DJ one I can find is the ancient CDJ 850, which remarkably is still a current model and costs substantially more than the LC6000. Denon DJ's own SC players make for great Serato controllers too, but they also start at more than double the price of an LC6000. Truly, this is one of those times when I look at a product and I question why it didn't exist already. One note on power: in most situations USB bus power is sufficient to run a pair of LCs, really hammering home their plug and play nature. The only time I ever needed to even take the power supplies out of their boxes was when connecting both into the USB ports on the back of the Rain 72 Mark II and the Pioneer DJ DJM S11. That just seemed to be a bit too much power draw on a single USB port. But when plugged directly into my laptop, bus power was enough every single time. Before I wrap up, I do want to be clear that I really dig the LC6000s as controllers, not just because of what they can do, but also because of the way they do it. In a year of using the SC6000Ms, I found the workflow that they offer, the loop controls, the pads, the pitch bend buttons, the way you browse your library, plus their feel and durability to be absolutely on point. So to have a device which feels as good as those full players, available to software users for less than half the price, for me, that's an absolute win. So there you go, my take on the LC6000s from Denon DJ. These things have blown my expectations out of the water, not really on the kind of Prime series side of things, because I knew that's what they were going to do. You know, as soon as I saw the first leaks of these, yeah, okay, they're going to be the layer controller. Denon DJ have been building towards this really since the dawn of the Prime series. It makes total sense, it's logical, works great. So that I was expecting. But to have these also be very accomplished single deck controllers for your DJ software, that was not in my head as something they were going to do. And it's really, really good. I've mostly used these, to be honest, as Serato DJ Pro controllers, because I can use whatever Serato compatible mixer I want. and just have these as my decks. And it works really well. You know, not every DJ wants a big spinning platter kind of thing, you know, Rain 12 or something like that. Lots of DJs have grown up with controllers and media players. And so these make a lot of sense. Price-wise, yep, they're not the cheapest things in the world, but they're also a lot more affordable than buying a dedicated media player and then just using it as a Serato or virtual DJ controller. So value is very much in the eye of the beholder with these. I do think you're getting your money's worth, absolutely, especially when you consider all of the stuff that they can do. Overall, yeah, just not what I expected at all. And in this case, that's a very good thing. Thanks for watching today. Make sure you subscribe for all our future tips, tricks, and product reviews. I'll see you soon.